welcome to PwC's Boardroom Forum Live. Today, you're joining us on episode 2 of our series on Business Model Reinvention. Today, we'll focus specifically on the concept of value creation and fit for growth, and really want to tease out and understand how these concepts can be leveraged to optimize businesses and ensure sustained success. To speak to us more about this today, we welcome Andrew Dalling and Sheivaan Naidoo, who focus on both the concepts of value creation and fit for growth. Welcome, Andrew. Welcome, Sheivaan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Perhaps to kick us off, Andrew, starting with you, how is business model reinvention enabled by fit for growth and value creation?
So Fit for Growth is a data-driven approach that understands and analyzes the business's value chain. It's actually the foundation to business model reinvention. When we stand back and understand what business model reinvention is, it's all around understanding the capabilities of that organization, the value proposition that it offers, as well as the resources and profit models that actually drive the profitability and success of that organization. Fit for Growth is the foundation to that analysis and to that exercise, and positions the organization to fulfill the business model reinvention.
And Sheivaan, perhaps coming back to you as well, what is driving the conversations with your clients from a business reinvention perspective at the moment? What are some of the key topics?
Certainly. I think at the center of it is a recognition by our clients that the world is changing at an unprecedented pace, that disruption is inevitable, and it's driven by a number of macro factors, whether that be existential threats, megatrends, or regional and local intricacies. In our recent global CEO survey, as an example, 42% of CEOs admitted that they didn't believe their business model would be viable 10 years into the future. 52% of CEOs also indicated that they would look to build new revenue streams as a key priority over the next 3 years. These numbers are staggering, of course, and it creates a sense of urgency and underscores the need for clients to be forward-thinking, adaptable, and resilient. I think that customers, companies, and key decision makers that do that well are the ones that will be able to adapt to thrive, create the sustainable value, and crudely speaking, be the Netflixes amongst the blockbusters, if you will.
So on the concept of accelerating growth, maybe we can drill down a bit around that. How should the clients be thinking around that concept, particularly as it relates to BMR? And what role does deals and M&A play in this context?
It's about reframing the thinking from a strategic perspective and defining the value creation pathway, the journey, and your ultimate value proposition now and into the future. Looking at your profit formulas, looking at the evolving needs of your customers and their preferences, and how you are able to address their requirements by considering your people and capabilities, as well as your processes, resources, and so on. It's a holistic journey, and companies need to look at that in an outward manner with a customer-centric hat in mind rather than an insular one that they typically use. I think that M&A and deals can play a pivotal role as a transformative catalyst for change. What that means is that you can consider transformative acquisitions, strategic acquisitions, partnerships, the ability to optimize your capital structure as you look to redefine this value proposition, whether it be moving into new markets, expanding your adjacencies and vertical integration and so on. At the same time, considering disposals that can allow you the capital that you're required to focus on the core, and expanding that as you build this value proposition into the future. And I think that's where M&A and deals can play a role.
Okay, fantastic. Andrew, the perspective that's been shared around M&A and deals has been, obviously quite enlightening, but perhaps you could share one of the takeaways from episode 1 was that BMR is not a strategy, but a comprehensive approach to rethinking and reshaping the core elements of businesses. So by its nature, It seems like it involves an entire organization. So with who do conversations around this start?
Oh, that's a great question. The background to business model reinvention is ultimately looking at how the business operates, how it drives profitability. What are the resources that actually enable the profitability? What are their capabilities? As well as what the value proposition is. So if you stand back and say, well, who does that actually involve? The truth is, who's ultimately accountable for the growth and profitability of that organization? That's where the conversation needs to start. What we find is, if we engage in this process through looking at functional aspects of the organization, we often land up talking to the wrong people. It's not around functional ownership and responsibility. It's ultimately around accountability. And that generally sits with the chief executive officer, chief growth officer, and the likes, not the functional VP for sales and marketing, as an example. The reality is, whilst it involves the entire organization, the accountability for growth sits with either the chair of the board or that of the chief executive officer. And that's generally the starting position when we go into a conversation like this or an engagement that's similar to this.
Sure. And I think you've shared some good insights around the fact that it's across organizations, so to speak, in terms of just the different areas, although championed, of course, by the right level at a C-suite as well. Sheivaan, if we come back to sort of PwC's cross-functional capabilities, how does BMR leverage that in ultimately accelerating business growth?
So when you think about the journey, it can be a seismic consideration, and that can be overwhelming. Once you're able to have a congruent vision, strategy, and purpose in place, you have to execute on that on all aspects of the business. You have to do that holistically, and you have to do that harmoniously. And that does entail looking at your M&A. It does entail looking at tax, R&D, procurement, training people. It's across all aspects of the business. And I think you need a trusted advisor with the right skill sets, multidisciplinary expertise to walk that entire journey with you. And I think, as one of the largest professional services firms in the world, rooted in deep sector specialism with the right transformation experts, business model experts, M&A and deals professionals, along with an array of services, including tax people, IT, accounting, you name it. I think we are well positioned to take that holistic approach, that partnership approach with our clients, and effectively make the journey slightly less scary. When we're able to align our capabilities with the customer's ultimate objectives, we're able to support them in creating the sustainable path for growth.
And Andrew, on the back of that, what does a BMR journey then look like? A typical journey. We understand that it requires multidisciplinary insights and the like, but what does a typical journey look like?
So the intent of business model reinvention is to drive profitability and growth through a sustainable approach. So that's really the starting point. What we've cleared up is that Fit for Growth, as an example, is one of the aspects that needs to be considered, as well as that sort of deals in an accelerator perspective. There are a number of other areas of focus, as Sheivaan has mentioned, that need to come into this, to look at the value proposition, understand the capabilities of the organization, establish where your resource allocation is, and ultimately how you're driving profit. So yes, it is multifaceted. But when we look at organizations and we start to understand what is the catalyst for something like business model reinvention, there are a number of examples, and I think one that comes to mind is probably if we take a telco situation. So the context to a telco organization in today's world is, strategically the business has changed as organizations have moved, as the ultimate customers move from utilizing voice to data. That's driven an entire change in the way in which the market is structured. So the impact of that is margins are declining, and there's further investment in networks and infrastructure to drive a response to that of the customer needs. Ultimately, your resource set is now being utilized to drive an increase in investment in networks whilst your margins are declining. The question from that perspective is, if I have a business model as it stands today, is it actually enabling that? And how do I address the situations where products that I previously had offered are potentially obsolete, as well as where I'm focusing my assets and my resources? Are they actually servicing the needs of the customer? And what we find in this situation is as we go into business model reinvention, it's really about understanding, are you allocating the right products and the right services in a way that your value proposition is correct? Spending the right capital in the right places with the right technology and people actually enabling it. And what business model reinvention does is it aligns those aspects to that of your strategy and a changing market condition in a sustainable manner. So when we step forward and say, well, okay, so what are those accelerators to actually drive growth? As an example, it is acquisition. When we look at the competitor landscape, the product's commoditized. There's a multitude or disaggregation of the market as more players have come into play, impacting that of the ultimate profitability of the organization. So when we stand back and say, how do we address this? Well, one, you need to understand what the business model looks like. And that's the intent. But the objective really is to take that understanding and drive a business model re-engineering exercise to get it to a point of driving profitability and focusing on strategy ultimately. So to stand back and say, what's the problem statement to a business model reinvention exercise? It can be a multitude of things from what I've just mentioned, but it can be a commoditized market. It can be situations where the landscape's changed due to competition. There's a host of issues or opportunities that occur to actually enable something like this. And hence the need for a combination of skills, capabilities, as well as accelerators to actually enable the business to drive profitability.
I think definitely you've given us a lot to actually think about. I mean, definitely a concept that is so relevant today. I mean, given what we're dealing with the changing landscape in technology, economics, and the like. So thanks so much for sharing. Perhaps as we land today's session, just to ask, any closing comments?
So from my perspective, what is the ultimate objective here? It's about aligning the organization's strategy as it has been defined today to that of its business model that actually delivers the strategy. The reinvention of the business model, in many cases, is required to actually deliver the strategy. Ultimately, the intent of the organization is to drive shareholder value and customer value. And with that in mind, the business model needs to be structured in a way that it enables that. So stand back, understand the business model, and align it to that of those intentions, and get it to a point that you drive profitability, certainly where our heads are at in that regard.
From my perspective, I think that companies and their key decision makers need to have the fortitude to stay the course. There is a recognition and companies are well versed in defining a vision 2026 or a mission 2030. But I think the opportunity now is for these decision makers to lay down the gauntlet and ask the question of what business 2050 is. What is our value proposition into the future? Because how they answer that and how they respond now will define the future of their business.
Super. Andrew, Sheivaan, thank you so much for your valuable contributions today. Bottom line, profitability, big driver, lots to think about. Thanks again for your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
For those of you joining online, thanks for joining. Just to note, this, as I indicated at the start, this is the second episode of a series of 4. So do join us for the next one, where we will be covering the aspect of operating model and tax and how these concepts can really play themselves out as companies deliver value, manage resources, and align tax strategies in mitigating issues that their businesses are facing and ultimately also contributing to cost reduction. So do join us next time. Thanks again.